as far as I can see. And I am going to talk about swarm control and prevention, but I'm also going to I'm going to throw some ideas out, which sort of my thinking really, and I don't know whether I'm right or not, but I'll discuss those as we go. So if I were to ask you why bees swarm, you would all tell me that they swarm to reproduce, which is what the books say, and is obviously absolutely correct. It is the greatest spectacle, as I've seen. It's a hugely risky business for them. They try and organise themselves so that the colony is at its greatest, so that they split, so that both sides of that split, because it's about reproduction, manage to survive. They have to decide who goes, how many go, what age are they, when to go. It really is a fantastic thing that I think. In the wild, according to our friend Tom Seeley, who will be joining us later in the year, in January, I think, 25% of swarms will die within 1 year. That's without varroa, in a varroa-free area. And on average, a colony would live for just 5 years. Okay, so if it swarms 2 or 3 times and a quarter die, the R becomes about 1, which means that they sort of break even. There'll be good periods, as in all insects, where more than 25% survive, and there'll be bad years when less than 25% survive. So, if I think this is all textbook stuff now. If we think of internal triggers, and I like the word triggers, of why they swarm. It's you can all read this. It's about the size of the colony. It's about brood nest construction. All these things are well documented and well researched. But I think it's a bit more than that. And I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to look at all those and I'm going to come back to them. We've got the external triggers, like the time, the weather, whether there's flow on favourable resources in order to survive this critical period for them. So let's see what happens in swarm preparation. They actually start directly preparing for a swarm 3 or 4 weeks before that swarm period takes place. And the way they do that is that they feed the queen, and they feed the queen excessively, so her egg laying increases. That's actually quite important. I'm going to come back to that. And before they swarm, a week or so before they swarm, they will increase the amount of honey that they store, and it goes up to about 36 grams from normally, I think it's about 10 grams they hold. So that they are preparing, that they need that because they're giving up their home, going out to start afresh, and that's going to be used to draw wax and to get them through the first few days. Then just before they swarm, obviously the queen's got to be reduced in size. So the workers then reduce her feeding, so she slims down so that she's able to swarm. And you start seeing eggs in queen cups, but as I've said lots of times, just because you see an egg in a queen cup doesn't mean they're going to swarm there and then, but it's an indication. I remember when I was starting out, there were no practical, and I got sort of Ted Hooper's book in one hand, and I was going through the colony, and he says, if there's an egg in a queen cup, doesn't mean they're going to swarm. So I left the egg there, but I went back 4 days later to see what they were doing with it, and there was still an egg in the queen cup. So obviously the egg, it hatches after 3 days. They've obviously taken that out and replaced it. All this is preparation to do with the weather, etc. I don't know. Just before, and just before they swarm, the day before they swarm, or maybe a bit before, the colony becomes very calm. They do less gathering of nectar. They can become very quiet, lethargic. They sort of start working before the day when they do swarm, and that's the time when they start running around. I'm going to go to that, chasing the queen, getting excited, and they get quite antagonistic towards the queen. They don't fight her, but they nibble at her and they push her around, keeping her going. So these internal triggers that we're told: the size of the colony, brood nest construction, space for the queen to lay, age of the workers, distribution of queen pheromone, and various people have recorded these through history, through development of beekeeping, and I'm sure they're all correct. But what I'm going to say is, does that make them swarm, or is that the situation because they're going to swarm? You follow me? So, if you look at the size of the colony, well, the colony is large because the queen 4 weeks ago started laying. It's large because they're going to reproduce. Okay, if it was a small colony, then it's probably too small to divide into two. Brood congestion, well, they're not stupid. They know the size of the brood nest that they require. And if, again, 3 or 4 weeks ago, she increased her laying to the point that there was no more room to lay, that's because they knew they'd be swarming. And likewise, fewer unoccupied cells. It's a bit like, I always try and think of sort of human analogies that you can put to this, and I find it quite difficult. One of them was, I go to Sandy Park, well, I used to go to Sandy Park when we were allowed to, but if you were looking from the outside, you could say, okay, what makes these rugby players come out? Well, actually, they come out when there's a crowd, but that doesn't make them come out. The crowd go there because they're coming out. And I think a lot of that applies to the triggers of swarming. They call it triggers, and they are triggers, but they're there mostly because they're ready to swarm. The worker age, when a colony swarms, about 70% of the workers are less than 10 days old. Well, if the queen was on a laying spree 3 weeks ago, the bees, there's going to be a lot of young bees around. So again, that's because they're going to swarm. They don't swarm because there's a lot of young bees. There's a lot of young bees because they're going to swarm. And the distribution of pheromones, that's one of the things that's clearly been demonstrated scientifically to be correct. But if you've got a congested brood nest with lots of bees in it, the distribution of pheromones will be reduced. Age of the queen, yes, to an extent. I think this is a difficult one. A young queen starting off, she might not swarm in the first year, but my experience is that she's quite capable of swarming in the first year if the colony developed to a reasonable size. And likewise, when she's getting older, she's just as likely to swarm. In fact, what I do find strange is if she's getting old and becoming unproductive, and the books tell us that they're likely to swarm then, it doesn't make sense to me why they'd want to swarm with a queen that's not actually very viable. You think they'd supersede and then swarm. If I was doing it. I'm not sure about that one. That one definitely true, because that's what it's about. Okay. So I just wanted to go through those things. You won't read those in books. If you take an exam, you won't be saying those things because they're just my thinking, really. But I do like swarms, and I do think it's a fascinating thing. So when do they go? They will go when there's a viable replacement. So they will normally go on the first nice day after the queen cell is sealed. Okay, open queen cells don't normally go, but they can do if they're about to seal them. But first nice day, and she'll make half a dozen queen cells, and they'll be a different age. And I'm guessing that is about having queens available, whatever the weather. So if you get a bad spell, they can get rid of some queens that are going to hatch and let the other younger ones come on. And the workers do I don't know whether you've seen this, but they do shake and push them. I've got a video, I think, in the next slide, or the next one slide, but I'm guessing that it might not play because of the broadband width that I get, but we'll see. At that time, the scouts are already looking for a new nest site, and you get the workers piping as well. The workers running up and down the comb, up in front of the hive, and the original queen, and I've only ever seen this once. She's a reluctant participant in the swarm. She gets pushed out by the workers. They chase her out the hive, and I've said that. So if you remember, 3 days an egg, 5 days a larvae, sealed on the 8th day. The video's coming up now. Just put your hands down, give me a thumbs down if it's not playing for you. Was that okay? Did you see that?
Yes, I heard it too.
Yeah, you heard the queen piping then?
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that was the first virgin out that went piping to get rid of the other queen cells. But that's obviously, as you see, a mature clicked queen, and she was piping. There was a queen cell in that colony, and she was after it. She wanted to get rid of it, I'm guessing. And she gets that piping noise by isolating her wings from her flight muscles, operating flight muscles while her chest is on the comb. And you could see how antagonistic the workers were to the Queen. They weren't being friendly to her. They weren't biting her, but they weren't being friendly to her. They're pushing her around. That's the gentle part of just before they swarm. The other thing that I was going to mention, that I didn't, because I forgot, was how come bees decided to reproduce by swarming? I mean, I wasn't at the meeting 50 million years ago when they came to that decision, but I want to know how they evolved to do that. And what made me think about this was when Asian hornet came in, or just before it came into the UK, and I was doing some research for work, and trying to understand the life cycle. And the life cycle of a hornet and a bumblebee and a wasp, they don't get their mature females out, their guides out, until September, October. Now, I was thinking, well, we get our bees, our honeybees, produce their queens in April, May. So then I thought, because I didn't realise about the hornets, and so I thought, well, why is that? Then I thought, well, that's the very reason that they overwinter as a unit. They overwinter as a unit in order to allow them to build up quickly and to reproduce by swarming. Then I thought, why would they want to reproduce by swarming? What's all that about? And animals in general, the greater they look after their young, the fewer young they have. So if you look at a butterfly, a cabbage white, it will lay its eggs on your brassicas. It will lay thousands of eggs on your, and that's the only maternal job it has. It ignores them after that. So they have to hatch into caterpillars, have to eat the things, they have to turn into chrysalis, then they have to mate. They have to do all those things on their own. The bumblebee and wasp and whatever, they take a bit more care over their young. They have them in their nest, they lay their egg, they feed the larvae in the same way as honeybees do, and they look after them as young. And then when they're old enough, when they're adults and they're sexually active adults, they go off and they mate, and that's the end of the story as far as the parents are concerned. And the wasp, the hornet, will have about 300 guys going out on their own, mated, and going through the winter. But obviously, out of the 300, only one or two survive to get mated and start a new nest. The honeybee, and this is what I find fascinating, what they do, they look after it as an egg, they look after it as a larvae, they look after it as a young adult. And when it swarms, not only do but they actually give it their home. They give it the nest, they give it brood, they give it stores. And the old queen goes off and starts again. Now, they only reproduce, if swarming is reproducing, they will do it once, maybe twice if there's a cast. Humans, they'll have one offspring per cycle, maybe two if it's twins. So they're actually at the same level as we are as the number they produce. So overwintering And swarming, I think, is about looking after their offspring and providing it with a home. Anyway, that's my bit of theory. You can task me on that at the end. So back to consequences of swarming. First of all, I think we have a duty of care. It's difficult to believe, but not everybody likes bees. Some people are frightened of them. Some people might even be allergic to them. And if they get into awkward places, we might have to have this sort of stuff to retrieve them. People phone me up and say, there's a swarm in the chimney, can you get it for me? When you explain that actually you build a cherry picker and what have you, they quickly go off the idea. Also, you lose bees. If you lose bees, you lose honey. And since we've got varroa in this country, most swarms are going to die anyway. So you're all familiar with this. This is the life cycle. Adults increasing, okay, brood. As soon as you get to maid, the queen reduces her laying, and they've stopped there. If they swarm, they'll swarm, and the numbers will drop right down. And this is the time. This is the main flow, okay. They time it so it's before the main flow, so that both parts of the swarm are able to take advantage. So the chances of getting any honey from a colony that swarms, and this is a really good year, are about nil. Last year, I think I got a couple that did get some. This year, July was pretty poor anyway. So that's why if you lose a swarm, chances of getting any honey that year are pretty remote. So some things for swarm prevention. Okay, following on from what we said about space, etc. There is a certain influence by the size of the brood box. I think a national's probably a tad small, but that's not a reason why I wouldn't recommend it. I think a Dayton's is probably too big, but I think you can work around the fact that the national, which is the commonest hive in the UK, can be used. There are lots of ways of using it, so it's all right. I do think it's super early, so I overwinter with a super beneath my brood box, and I move that over the top on the first inspection in March. And one of the things that particularly new beekeepers might do is, because they're so concerned about colonies starving, they feed them a lot. That's not a bad thing, but you can get the frames on the outside congested, solid honey, old pollen. And so if you've got 11 framed national and you've got 2 frames each side with stores, then that reduces her laying drastically. Young queens, certainly this I know, certain strains of bee are more likely to swarm than others. When I imported Danish queens, my swarming rate went down from whatever it was before, I don't know, sort of 80 to 50%. It made a marked difference with the strain of the bee. And you probably know, I'm not always, but I tend to clip my queens, not as the books say to only inspect every 14 days. I still inspect every 7 days because I don't want to lose the queen. But if I'm out inspecting somebody else's bees during the day, the first nice day, and mine's swarm, at least that I'll go back and I can normally find the queen with about a dozen workers around her in the front of the hive, or she might walk back up one of the legs and be sitting a little bunch under the varroa floor. Comb management is, comb management is really important, and I like to, it refers to this bit, but I like to produce and have available drawn brood comb that hasn't been bred in. I think that's really important. It's so useful. So my first brood box after the one super, my first super will be a brood box with foundation in, and they'll draw that out beautifully. And that's often on the oilseed rape. I will then extract it, and if I don't get it all, and you never get all the oilseed rape, some will have set, I don't worry about that, because now I've got 11 frames with a bit of set oilseed rape, which I can use for various things throughout the year. When I started beekeeping, Denbury splits were all the rage, and as a way of particularly dealing with the national box, as a swarm prevention as well as a swarm control, you can use that. And also, I like even better, as you know, I like the shook swarm process, and there's evidence that it's a really good way doing a shook swarm to get in new comb, but also to delay or reduce the percentage swarming. Right, so look at the shook swarm. Which I think is really good. Why for colonies, why earlier on when I said for colonies were only last 5 years, according to Tom Seeley, is because of the build-up of pathogens on the brood comb. Bumblebees and wasps don't have to worry about that because they're only using their nest for a few months, but the honeybee has to continually use the same comb. And I think one of the things we do as beekeepers, we don't change the comb frequently enough as they would do in the wild. So shook swarm, really good. We use it in the National Bee Unit for controlling ESB, but it controls Nosema and all the other chalk brood, all the other pathogens and spores that are there. So first thing, I find the queen, keep her safe. I put her in a queen cage, move the original box to one side. I place a new box, here we are, a new box on the original site. A queen excluder below, okay, so that they don't abscond, because I'm not going to put any eggs in. I put 4 or 5 frames either side. I often put a empty super on top of that to act as a funnel so that I can shake all the bees into the new box. And when I put the queen at one side, she's in a queen cage, I'll often put her in the bottom there, just so they've got her. And then I fill in the space with new frames or foundation. So from my extracted brood frames that I've got, I will put one in there so that the queen can get laying straight away, and the rest foundation. If you haven't got a drawn comb, you could actually use a super comb in there, that'd be fine, they'll draw it out, but at least you've got somewhere to lay straight away. Show the queen there. Then you feed extensively until they've drawn all that out. So I would move, that's on one occasion when I would move combs around. As they draw it out, I'd put another one in. I was going to say something then that slipped my mind. I forgot what it was. Oh, it's actually quite useful to have 2 people doing this, so that one's got a black bin liner that they can put the comb in, which stops the bees going back onto it. I was speaking to someone who did this, and he used the old frames back in another colony to supplement them. Well, that sort of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? It's a brilliant way of treating for varroa mite, because we know that 75%, 80% of the mites at any one time are in the brood, so you're going to get rid of all those mites. And also, if you want to put a bait hive in, or you want to treat with oxalic acid, you're going to get rid of all the ferritic mites. So it's a really, really good way of swarm control, or reducing the likelihood of swarming, and sort of getting on top of varroa, and getting rid of all the pathogens. people tell me it's such a shame after the winter that they've built up onto 4 or 5 frames of brood and we're destroying it. It is a shame, and it's actually quite difficult to do, but they will overtake an unshook swarmed colony without a doubt. It seems like they just go for it. They work really hard. It's like the new foundation. It's like a swarm. We know that swarms work harder than normal colony, and I think it's like that. What I was going to say, it came to me then, now it's gone again. What was I going to say? Oh, timing, yes. The time I would do this is as early as possible, with it being consistent enough, warm enough to draw out wax. So March could be the time, but if you've got a cold March, you've got to leave it till April. I think I've mentioned all those. This is one which I did, I think with Richard Ball. This is in Dorset. Remember in the shook swarm, I said, find the queen, put her in a cage. On this colony, we couldn't find the queen, could not find the queen. Clearly, she's under there somewhere, and we had to go through it and get them all back in. I couldn't find the queen, but so that's another really good reason why you can mark the queen. So, Demery seems to be coming back into fashion now. It's quite simple. You place a, I'll go through it on here. So this is your colony. Flying bees, queen, okay. With Demery, you put a new brood box on the original site. Again, if you've got drawn comb, a frame or 2 of drawn comb so she can start laying, queen excluder, supers, and your the rest of your brood. Sorry, you put 1 frame in there. I'll go back there and it should tell me. Put 1 frame of sealed brood in at the bottom and the queen. You will have to go through your this box because they will build emergency queen cells. So after 7 days or so, go through, remove any emergency queen cells. They now cannot make queen cells in there. And gradually, the nurse bees will migrate down to the queen and her brood. And in 21 days, there'll be no worker brood up there, and you can get rid of that. So now you've got them on a new comb. You've also, for that period of time, had actually quite a big brood box. So that's one way, if you're operating on nationals, to not lose a swarm and give them a bit more space during that peak laying time. Yeah. Now we look at swarm control. So those 2 were ways of preventing the colony making swarm cells. Swarm control, or what we do when we find queens. I'm just going to look at the watch, 8:15. I'm rushing a bit. Okay, there's some options. Here we go. Draw the queen cells. You can remove the queen. You can use a nucleus method, Demery, or an artificial swarm. I'm going to go through all of these fairly quickly and see where we go. Okay. I reckon that about half the people I speak to when I go around giving talks would admit to destroying queen cells for swarm control. Okay, so you must, if you do that, you must find the queen, you must shake all the bees off each frame and destroy all queen cells. Now you know how difficult it is to find all the queen cells, the little ones they build on the side of the frame. You've got to get them all. And you've got to do that every 5 days until they swarm anyway. That's my experience. So I would say, and I tell beginners, never ever destroy queen cells. Okay, there's more problems caused by destroying queen cells than not. So I don't like that method, and I would never do it. I would never recommend it. Slightly better, okay, is to remove the old queen. So you find that, put in a cage, select one unsealed queen cell, destroy all the other queen cells. You've got to go back in 7 days because there'll be more emergency queen cells. In 28 days, you should have a new queen. It'll be longer than that before she starts laying. It might be 3 or 4 weeks. Now, that'll work. That will work. But I would be I think I might have another, yeah. I would only do that. I would only do that if it doesn't reduce forages in the main flow. Okay. So when I used to inspect Dorset, I often went with Robert Field, who's the best honey producer I've been with. And he would only do that during July, because he didn't want to mess around with the colony during July, because all the workers are there, all the foragers are there. So he would take a queen out, and let them get on with it. He's not reducing the workforce. If you do it in May, in May, any time before May, well, May the sort of mid-May, all the eggs laid then will take part in the foraging in July. So if you do it in May or April, you are going to reduce the foraging workforce. So I would never do it in the spring. I might do it in July. I might. The nucleus thing, that's the same mistake in the queen cell out, a queen out, except it's a bit of an a guarantee. You make a little nuke up and you put the queen in there, and it guarantees you, if there's a problem with making a queen, then you've always got this queen to make up. But I don't like it. I don't like, if that's a honey producing colony, I do not like tampering with that. You're reducing it in size, and it just probably won't get any honey that year. So I don't like that. But that's the same as taking a queen out, except you're taking some frames with it and keeping it alive instead of shredding on it. And this is a bit of a thing. You know, I am sort of, I don't like losing cells, swarms. And this is a little picture I did Sunday afternoon. Must have been at a loose end, because the little cast comes out. I'd already done an artificial swarm, and the parent colony, which was to one side, threw a cast out. So it's not going to affect my production, but I thought, oh, I'll get that. So I went into my original colony, and if there's a cast, obviously there's more queen cells coming out. So I took a new virgin and I put her in a queen cage, and I tied her to this wire. This is electric fencing wire, and the swarm was hanging here. And I threw the rope over so that my new virgin was right there. They all went round the rope, and I gradually pulled it down to the waiting box and dropped it in. So that was a Sunday afternoon bit of fun. And there's my queen cage with the virgin from the same colony in there. Okay. So, So we spoke about Demery as a method of swarm control. But you can also do it if you've actually got a queen cell, and it operates in much the same way. Fill a brood box with some drawn comb, one original frame with still brood. The queen, you place the box on top of the supers, leaving one queen cell, which wasn't before, remember. In 7 days, you've got to go and remove all the all emergency cells. So here we are, queen cell, same as before, except this time you're going to get a queen there. Okay, so you can either take the queen cell out eventually or modify it slightly and put a split board in there. Okay, split board in there, make that a separate colony, and the queen will come out and get mated. That's just a bit of variation. So that would turn the Demaree method into Snellgrove. Now, you probably know this is the systems that I like, and I'll just go through this. So again, we find the queen. I move the colony just 3 foot away, but I turn it 90 degrees. I do that so that the returning bees don't touch the fanning of the parent colony. Place a new brood box on the original site. 1 frame of eggs. That's what I say on here. The way I do it now, I just use a couple of frames of drawn comb. I don't put any eggs in, but for this, I put eggs in with that. 2 frames of drawn comb. With that, the least the better. I was talking to a beekeeper some time ago. This is some time ago, and he said it didn't work. And I said, "What do you do?" And I said, "You put 1 frame in, a la Ted Hooper." He said, "Oh, I did better than that." He said, "I put 3 in." Well, the more you put in, the worse it is. The least you put in, the more like an actual swarm it is. So in an ordinary swarm, they would be starting from scratch. They would not have any brood. So that's the way I do it now, mostly for varroa control. Then we paint the foundation. I return the supers to the original site. So original queen, the flying bees. And on the new site, you've got brood, queen cells, nurse bees, and you've got okay, that should be something on there, but there isn't. So you've also got all the varroa. So we'll go through that now. So here's your colony. This is stage 1, flying bees, queen cells, queen, 2 supers. I'm going to leave that there because that's how it is. This is showing you again. So we take the roof off, take the supers off, queen excluder off, middle box, pop the queen in, move that 3 foot away, and I'm going to move it that 90 degrees. A new floor. I put a queen excluder in there, and the reason why I put a queen excluder is because I'm not putting any eggs. If you're putting eggs and brood from this parent colony, you can admit that. Brood box. Couple of sheets of drawn comb, and the rest you can make up with foundation. Pop the queen in, queen excluder, supers back, roof, move that, roof, flying bees, queen, old queen, 9 frames of foundation, 2 frames of drawn comb, all the flying bees, super, parent colony, queen cells, brood, nurse bees, and all the varroa. Okay. Now, people say, should we remove all those queen cells? Well, what I would do, I would remove all but leave 1 nice open queen cell. But to be honest, in my situation, I consider this is 1 colony. This colony is my honey producing colony. This colony is to make a new queen. If it sends a cast out, like one of mine did, that's not a disaster. It's a minor hiccup, because I only want a queen from her anyway. And I'm going to unite at the end of the flow. I'm not going to make another colony up. I'm going to unite at the end of the flow. So I'm then going to go into the winter with new comb, a new queen that's been made there, because I'll change her over, best possible way. So this is a really, really good way of reducing Varroa. For people that do swarm control and don't take the opportunity to treat for Varroa, you're just missing a trick, really, because you can get rid of here 80%. If you want to, you could treat with oxalic acid as soon as all the broods hatch, because you're then treating the phoretic mites. Okay. You take that away as soon as she's laying. I think I've said all that. You might have to feed this colony if necessary. But this has got all the stores on it. This should go off and make lots of honey. So this, I think, is a really good way of not losing swarms, good swarm control method, but also a good way of getting rid of Varroa. And that's it. We know what that is. Okay.
Could everyone unmute if they want to ask David a question? Can I ask a question?
8:30, that's not bad.
David, can I ask a
go
question?
On. Only if it's an easy one.
I'm sorry, but I don't know if it's you or me, my computer cut out when you were talking about the one where you find the queen, you move the hive away and do the 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, you said why you really liked it, and I sort of missed that bit. I've got a bit of crackling on my line.
I like it because it fulfills all my requirements. It stops them swarming. It keeps the colony together. As I said at the end, I've got a honey producing side. I think it's one colony. I've got honey producing side, and I've got a new queen producing side. It gets rid of Varroa. It changes the brood, changes frames. So I'm changing 11 frames all in one go.
Thanks.
I think comb management is really important. A lot of the books will say you change 2 or 3 every year. I don't do that. Sometimes you have to at the end if you do get manky old comb, but I would much rather do a shook swarm, change 11 combs, artificial swarm, change 11 combs.
Basil. Yeah, hi, David. I like your method very much. What was going through my mind is where I've got, say, one of my favourite colonies, really good temperament. Is there any reason why I shouldn't make 2 or 3 new colonies out of that? In other words, on that box you've moved to one side, couldn't I make that into 2 or 3 as long as I've got a frame of brood with a queen cell on each?
Yeah. I'll answer it in 2 ways. I'll answer the question you haven't asked to start with, and I'll answer the question you've asked. Okay, if it was a colony that you didn't like, okay, you'll notice on the slide I put a little box. I didn't talk about it, and you've got a colony that you do like. You can get a cell from that one if you breed and drop it in instead of using the cell that they produced. You change the cell. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Because if we constantly breed from colonies that swarm, are we not breeding colonies that swarm?
Yeah.
Answer your second question, absolutely. If people say to me they want to use it to make more colonies, I tell them to take a 5-frame nuke out, put it somewhere else in the apiary, or preferably in a different apiary, and then do it that way. As long as you keep, I think, as long as you keep a nuke by the side of that original colony, so that you can put a new queen in there as a means of replacing that queen. But yeah, you can divide it up and you could make 2 or 3 nukes out of it. Absolutely. And then you'd find queen cells and leave 1 in each nuke.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I wasn't sure how you got rid of the Varroa out of the, if you like, the original hive, original frames.
Yeah, I did rush it a bit.
treat?
Sorry. So by moving the parent colony away and having a brood break to start with, Varroa hates brood breaks. Okay, but you've got them away to one side. You can treat them with oxalic acid. Okay, so you could, when there's no brood left and there's only adult bees, all the Varroa will be on the adult bees. So you can do a Varroa treatment like you do in the winter. Yeah, or if you wanted to, if you didn't like that idea, you can use a sacrificial comb from the colony on the original site with some open brood, drop that in, all the Varroa will go into it. When it's sealed, you take it away. I tend to use oxalic acid, but I think the other way is just as good. That's how you get rid of the Varroa.
Alan.
David, whilst you've kept bees for a number of years, it's but a blink of the eye in the evolution of the bees. But do you think over your lifetime of keeping bees that you've noticed any difference in the propensity for swarming?
I think your first bit is right. It's in the blink of an eye. I start off. No, the answer is no. To be honest, I can't notice anything in 30 odd years. I think it's to do with the strain. I start on the assumption that all my bees are going to swarm, okay, and 80% might. But when I did get these Danish queens in, there was a marked difference, and it went down from sort of 80 down to 50 or 60, and that was noticeable, and that's about the strain. And this, yeah.
Yeah, David, when you were saying about queen cells, you kept saying use open queen cell.
Yeah, yeah.
Why are you choosing that as opposed to a good sealed queen cell?
Great question. And I should have said, really, if it's open, you can see the larvae and what it's like. If it's sealed, it might not be viable. It might have black queen cell virus or some other things which will stop it producing. It might be dead. So we always use open queen cell.
All right, yeah, it makes sense, I suppose. Thanks.
That's really. You were talking earlier on about Zoom being really good. I think it's done one or two things. I think there's talks. I find them a lot more difficult, to be honest, because I like to talk and challenge, and I can't do that. I'm just having to talk like a lecture rather than a discussion, and I like the discussion. But also, it's shown how well, for me, how poor my internet connection is. And you see a lot of it when I look okay when I'm looking at myself now, but on the recording it'll be all grainy. I noticed Basil's in particular has got a poor upload speed. My upload speed is 0.36, download speed 0.7, upload speed of 0.36. No wonder that if I send videos out, or sometimes my voice doesn't copy my